Right now, somewhere in your body, a single cell is fighting off an invader you'll never notice. You won't feel it. You won't remember it. Your immune system will just quietly win. But for most of human history, that same fight was the difference between life and death. Because getting sick used to be a full-body emergency. No medicine cabinet. No hospital down the road. No idea what a virus even was. Just you, a fever, and a group of people who had to decide, right then, what to do with you. So what actually happened when an ancient human got sick? The real answer isn't just about suffering. It's about a set of survival strategies so old, so deeply wired, that you're still running them today without knowing it. Start with the body itself. Long before anyone understood germs, the human body already had a plan. Fever isn't a malfunction. It's a weapon. Raising your internal temperature makes it harder for many pathogens to replicate, and it speeds up the immune cells hunting them down. Your ancestors didn't know why fever worked. They just knew that sweating, shivering, aching bodies were doing something important. And so were the behaviors that came with it. You've felt this. The bone-deep urge to lie down when you're sick. The total loss of appetite. The desire to be alone, wrapped in blankets doing nothing at all. That's not weakness. Researchers who study what's called sickness behavior, including work built on early experiments by neuroscientist Robert Dancer, have shown that this shutdown is coordinated by the brain itself. It's a deliberate redirection of energy, away from moving and socializing and toward healing. Your ancestors weren't lazy when they were sick. They were following an ancient script that kept them alive long enough to recover. Think about what that redirection actually costs. Energy is precious when every calorie comes from hunting or foraging. And yet the body chooses, again and again, to spend that energy on immune defense instead of movement. That's not an accident. It's a trait evolution made deliberately, favoring short-term weakness over long-term survival. A sick ancestor who kept walking, kept hunting, kept pushing through, often died faster than one who simply stopped. Stillness was strategy. And the same logic explains something else you've probably noticed. Why does everything taste wrong when you're sick? Why does food you normally love suddenly feel repulsive? Appetite loss during illness isn't random either. Digestion is expensive. Redirecting blood and energy away from your gut and toward your immune system means your body is making a calculated bet, prioritizing the fight happening inside you over the meal in front of you. Ancient humans who fasted instinctively during illness may have recovered faster than those who forced themselves to eat. Your body still remembers that bet. It's making it right now every time you get sick. But here's where it gets stranger. Getting sick was never just a private event. It was a community problem. Picture a small band of early humans, maybe 20 or 30 people, moving together across a landscape with no fixed home. One person develops a fever, a cough, a wound that won't stop weeping. What happens next? Sometimes the group slowed down. Sometimes they stopped entirely, waiting for the person to recover before moving on, even at real cost to the food supply. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, including long-term fieldwork among groups like the Hadza in Tanzania, have documented exactly this kind of costly caregiving. Sick or injured members were often fed, protected, and carried, not abandoned. That care wasn't guaranteed by nature. It was a choice, repeated so many times across so many generations that it became instinct. And that instinct left a mark you can still see in the ground. At a site in Spain called Cima de los Huesos, researchers uncovered the skeleton of a child, likely with a genetic condition affecting skull growth, who survived for years despite a disability that would have made independent survival almost impossible. Someone fed that child. Someone protected that child. Long before agriculture, before writing, before anything we'd call civilization, humans were already organizing their lives around keeping the sick alive. There's an even older example. In a cave in what's now Indonesia, researchers examining a skeleton dated to roughly 31,000 years ago found something remarkable. A lower leg amputated deliberately, cleanly, likely by a skilled hand, with the bone showing years of healing afterward. That person lived. Someone performed the procedure. Someone kept them alive through infection, through recovery, through a period when they couldn't hunt, couldn't gather, couldn't contribute in any obvious way to the group's survival. And the group carried them anyway. Does that surprise you? It should a little. It's easy to imagine early human life as brutally simple. Survival of the fittest, every person for themselves, the weak left behind without a second thought. But the physical evidence tells a different story. one written in bones that healed instead of bones that were abandoned where they fell. Why would evolution favor that? Wouldn't it be more efficient to let the weak fall behind? Here's the twist. Groups that cared for their sick weren't just being kind. They were more successful. A band that nursed people back to health kept more hunters, more mothers, more knowledge holders, more hands for the next crisis. Illness was constant. Injuries from hunting, childbirth, infection, parasites, none of it was rare. A group with no system for handling sickness would have bled out its own population over time. Compassion in this light wasn't a soft add-on to survival. It was a survival strategy in itself. But care alone wasn't enough. Ancient humans also had to make sense of illness itself, and this is where things get genuinely eerie. Without knowledge of bacteria or viruses, sickness needed an explanation. Across countless separate cultures, completely unconnected by geography or language, a strikingly similar idea appears again and again: illness as an intrusion. A spirit entering the body. A curse taking hold. An imbalance disturbing some invisible order. Medical historians point out that these belief systems, while scientifically wrong, weren't random superstition. They were early frameworks for something real. An outside force attacking the body from within. Which is, in a strange, twisted way, not far from the truth. And once illness had an explanation, it demanded a response. Healers emerged. Some of the earliest evidence of specialized medical knowledge comes from burial sites, where certain individuals were interred with collections of specific plants, tools, and objects unlike anyone else in their group. At a burial site in modern-day Israel, archaeologists uncovered the grave of what's believed to be a healer or shaman, surrounded by tortoise shells, animal bones, and a human foot, deliberately placed items suggesting ritual medical practice tens of thousands of years ago. Someone in that community was trusted specifically with the sick. Then there's the evidence written directly into bone. Paleopathologists, scientists who study disease in ancient skeletons, have found signs of healed fractures set with remarkable care, evidence of trepanation, a practice of deliberately cutting or drilling into the skull, with edges that show the patient survived the procedure and lived for years afterward. Ancient humans weren't just enduring illness. They were actively, sometimes surprisingly effectively, treating it. Think about the sheer nerve that takes. Cutting into a living skull with a sharpened stone tool. No anesthesia, no understanding of infection, no guarantee of anything except that doing nothing meant certain death. And yet the survival rates for some ancient trepanation sites are startlingly high. People weren't just surviving the illness that led to the surgery. They were surviving the surgery itself, sometimes undergoing the procedure more than once across a lifetime. Somebody somewhere was getting good at this. That's the quiet truth hiding underneath all of it. Medicine didn't begin in a hospital. It began around a fire, with someone pressing a hand against a fevered forehead, deciding based on nothing but experience and instinct what to try next. Now here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Some of the deadliest turns in human history happened not because people got sick as individuals, but because they started living close together. When humans shifted from small mobile bands to dense, settled communities, everything about disease changed. More people meant more contact. Stored grain meant more rodents. Domesticated animals meant new pathogens jumping species, a process researchers studying ancient DNA, including geneticist Johannes Krause and his work reconstructing pathogen genomes from archaeological remains, have traced directly into early farming villages. Diseases like tuberculosis and certain strains of plague appear to have exploded in prevalence precisely as agriculture spread. The very innovation that let humanity grow, in numbers, in permanence, in power, also built the conditions for the first true epidemics. Feel that for a second. The safety of settling down came bundled with a new, invisible danger. Progress and vulnerability arriving in the same package. That pattern has never really stopped. Consider what that meant for the humans living through it. For hundreds of thousands of years, small mobile groups had an accidental defense against outbreaks: distance. If sickness swept through one band, it often had nowhere else to go before it burned out. Once humans settled, that natural firebreak vanished. A pathogen could move from person to person to person, through a village, then along trade routes to the next village and the next. Genetic evidence pulled from ancient teeth and bones, work pioneered in part by researchers like Johannes Krause, has shown waves of plague moving across Eurasia thousands of years earlier than historians once assumed, riding the same trade networks that carried grain, tools, and ideas. The birth of civilization and the birth of pandemics weren't separate stories. They were the same story, told from two different angles. So how did any of this shape the version of you sitting here right now? Every time you isolate yourself with a cold, instead of pushing through your day, you're running the same ancient program that once protected an entire band from an outbreak. Every time you feel a pull to check on a sick friend, bring them food, sit with them even briefly, you're echoing behavior that kept small human groups alive for hundreds of thousands of years. Even your fear of illness, the low hum of anxiety when you feel a fever coming on, traces back to a time when getting sick genuinely could mean the end. You live in a world with vaccines, antibiotics, and hospitals your ancestors couldn't have imagined. But the instincts underneath all of it are unbelievably old. The urge to rest. The urge to care for others who are suffering. The urge to explain the invisible forces attacking your body, even when the explanation is wrong. None of that came from modern medicine. It came from tens of thousands of years of trial and error, written not in textbooks, but in bones, burials, and the quiet, repeated choice to not leave the sick behind. So the next time you're lying in bed with a fever, too tired to move, craving nothing but stillness and someone checking in on you, remember what's actually happening. You're not just sick. You're the latest link in an ancient chain of survival, one built entirely on the strange, powerful decision your ancestors made over and over again to keep each other alive.